In Keynote scripts that use our real browser agent, you have a completion event at the bottom of each step in your script. Here's a quick, simple one-page script, and the green completion rule shows up at the bottom of each step. Now what that means is your page has to reach the completion point before Kite will move forward and go to the next page. The criteria for whatever rule that's specified here has to be fulfilled before Kite registers that the page is completed, stops the timer for timing the performance of that page, and moves on to the next step. Completion rules can be of many different types. They get captured when you record your script based on what went on in the page during recording. So in your Kite scripts, you can select the completion event and change the type. I'm going to go through a quick explanation of each of these four types. Very common, you'll see captured download cycles of 1 as a completion rule, and a download cycle corresponds to an IE parameter called the ready state. Now you don't need to worry too much about what that is, but when IE finishes loading a page, the browser has a parameter called a ready state that is fulfilled, and it also puts the word done in the bottom left corner of the browser, so you'll see when the document was finished. That corresponds to 1 download cycle. Now, documents can have more than 1 ready state completes, and so you might see more than 1 download cycle as well. But whatever happens at record, we will capture that, and if the browser has multiple download cycles, you'll see those captured. Now sometimes with download cycles you can end up with a bit of a problem. There may be web pages that have a variable number of download cycles, and if you capture a download cycle count of say 5, and then on playback your script only has 2 download cycles or 3 download cycles, then basically the agent is going to wait for those 5 download cycles to occur. And if only 3 happen, it's just going to wait for the additional 2 even though they never are going to occur. So then you'd simply get hung up and your script would time out. So it's important to make sure that you don't have too many download cycles. A general rule of thumb is anytime you see download cycles larger than 1, that's suspect. You may get caught up with the agent waiting for more than 1 download cycle. So this rule works very well if it's download cycles of 1, maybe 2. The key to getting this right with download cycles is to play your script back a handful of times and make sure that it works every time. If you get hung up on any given page on playback and it doesn't finish, it could be because you've captured too many download cycles. And you could change that number to 1 and play it back and see what happens. Now a second type is a very common completion event as well. And if you select completion in your Kite script, you'll see the full rules shown in the properties editor. If you drop down the browser drop down, you see a couple more types here, 3 more types. HTTP messages is the middle one. That's the second most common rule. I'm going to pick that. And it changes my rule to inactivity of 1,000 milliseconds. So that's a catch-all completion event that's a little more conservative about waiting for everything to finish. So essentially the inactivity timer means the agent is going to wait for all the HTTP activity to stop for a period of 1 second, 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, once that happens, the agent realizes that the page is finished, and it will subtract the 1 second of time and call that the end of your page load time. This is a very good completion event for making sure that you catch everything that loads in the page, regardless of how many ready states happen. In the case where you record a script and you have a page that shows multiple download cycles, that would be a good alternative completion event to just change it to HTTP messages like I just did. You can change the 1,000 to whatever you like. If you want to have 3,000 milliseconds of silence, it just means it's going to have the longer gap of activity before it recognizes the page is finished. Okay, the third type is DOM. That's the second option here. But that's a completion event that will key off of something specifically being loaded into the web page. So the DOM completion event is a way to specify wait for a certain element to come into the web page. If you're going to recognize a specific tag in the HTML, you can pick an area or a button or an anchor tag and then add an attribute for that tag, such as a name, ID equals submit button. But essentially you need to add the name value pair parameters as your attribute of the anchor tag, or maybe it's a button. So that would be another way to say, as soon as that button is loaded into the DOM of the browser, our agent will complete the page and move on to the next step. Again, that's a DOM-based completion event. It's keying off of something specific in the page, and that's a very good way also, but it's very specific. You have to kind of identify the object you want to key off of. And then the final type is just timer, which is a static timer counter. So in loading your web page, the agent is going to not key off of anything specifically happening in the page. It's just going to be counting to 3 in this case. And as soon as we get to 3 seconds, we will chop the page no matter if it's finished loading or not and move on to the next step. So timer is not a smart completion event. It's not logical about what's happening in the browser, but it is sort of a good brute force way of getting through a page and finishing it without having any idea of what's happening in the page. So if all else fails, you can try timer as a completion event, but I would say better to try it with like 5 or 6 or 8 seconds to give it plenty of time to complete. There's one more option when you're using the browser type of completion event. You have a sub-event at the bottom of the list here. So if I go back to download cycles 1 by picking browser type, there's an event. If I open that up, I can add a compound event here of maybe a timer of 3 seconds. So what that means is we have to meet both of these criteria, and not necessarily in order. We just have to fulfill both the 1 download cycle and 3 seconds of time has to have elapsed. So that's a compound completion event. And if you have download cycles of 5 and you're not sure how many are going to occur on playback, a good thing to do is change it to 1 and then add a sub timer of 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. Thank you for watching.